Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Order. Item 1, resumption of debate on a Payment Services Amendment Bill, second reading.
Associate Professor Jamus Lim.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the proposed amendment in the Payment Services Act of 2019 takes a number of important steps to accommodate new innovations in payment systems and services. The very fact that an amendment is needed so soon, just 1 year after the enactment of the original act, demonstrates the speed by which technological developments can render even the best-laid legislation rapidly obsolete, or at the very least, struggling to catch up. While I understand the premise behind the proposed amendments with regard to scope, to essentially ensure adequate regulatory coverage of the bill to all MES licensees, I wish to raise 3 cautionary points, all related to potential unintended consequences. Before I proceed, I wish to declare that I am the Chief Economist Emeritus of a homegrown investment advisory firm which had previously been involved in payment services. For changes set forth in Clause 4, the applicability of the bill to payment services providers that hold either money-changing, standard payment institutions, or major payment institution licenses, there is also the need to take into account current economic realities. While the latter two groups have, by and large, rode through the pandemic relatively unscathed, this is not the case for money changers. I have residents operating such businesses that have reported declines in business of up to 90% and who do not anticipate any improvement to business in the months ahead. Accordingly, while the MES has plans to grant a 6-month exemption for newly regulated entities under this bill amendment, I wonder if there is scope for an even longer phase-in grace period applying only to money changers in light of their extremely challenging business climate at the moment. Clause 7E seeks to widen the scope of digital payment token service providers. Understandably, it attempts to cast a wide net. It's worth cautioning, however, that by defining such providers broadly, a number of very small players may unfortunately be caught in this expanded regulatory net. For instance, stipulating that any service involved in accepting digital payment tokens is unobjectionable if applied to large clearinghouses, but it becomes a concern if it's applied to small-time intermediaries collecting payments on behalf of his or her clients. As another example, a service arranging the transmission of digital payment tokens sounds appropriately targeted at custodians and brokers, but may raise awkward questions of whether Cousin Angie, by doing her Uncle Victor a favor by storing some of his e-cash in her digital wallet, may inadvertently find herself subject to MAS rules if she also happens to be a licensee. In the public consultation process, I believe that MES has indicated that the law's applicability is fact-dependent, and I quote here, and is based on, again, quote, detailed assessment of activities, and would generally apply to agents that are already currently subject to licensing. Even so, by no longer limiting the Act's applicability with the term major to now include all licensees, the language no longer automatically precludes small players. My colleague, Mr. Leon Pereira, has spoken more extensively about the detrimental effects of over-regulating small players, especially insofar as stifling innovation is concerned. Now, these are not just artificial constructs. In remote villages in developing countries, local youth may routinely play the intermediary role Such actions ultimately gave birth to formidable national institutions like M-Pesa in Kenya and Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. While Singapore is not a developing economy, a payment services law that does not consciously allow regulatory forbearance for small and medium enterprises may overburden these emerging firms with compliance to the long shadow of the law and hence stifle their growth. Relatedly, as far as I can gather, the legislation will treat all digital payment tokens equally. While there is merit in not picking a specific privately issued DPT to support, it strikes me as odd that the same treatment is extended even to official DPTs. After all, we currently afford special status to official fiat currency, as we should, not least to our local money, the Singapore dollar. And so, as long as there isn't any fraud, it is entirely reasonable to privilege an MAS-issued DPT. If so, then it would seem fair to exercise somewhat easier regulatory conditions for institutions transacting in e-Sing dollars. Finally, on the demand side, a general concern is that digitally sophisticated users of digital tokens, such as hawkers or the elderly, may inadvertently run afoul of MAS rules, perhaps because they may have signed up to terms and conditions that have devolved certain responsibilities of compliance from financial intermediaries to them. This would serve to further undermine their confidence in digital payments, where a number have already had negative experiences due to unscrupulous customers that have defrauded them, and weaken their overall willingness to actively participate in the digital economy. Notwithstanding these legislations, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I offer my support for the proposed amendments.